Welcome everybody to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus, and welcome to another movie review. I am Arthur, King of the Britons, and I seek knights to join my group in Camelot. Camelot. It's only a model. Shh. If you guys want us to review more fantasy films, or just if you enjoy the podcast, you can support us on the Patreon, my Fiverr page, and for December only, we will be looking into making t-shirts for Christmas, though that is still a ways away, and we don't know if we're going to get that done in time. But if you are interested, let us know. Lady Maeve, tell us about the D&D school.
Greetings, fellow adventurers. Do you want to play fun Christmas-themed adventures? I have two versions of something called a Very D&D Christmas. If you're between the ages of 7 and 16, I have a 4-week adventure on a website called OutSchool, where kids can take classes in all subjects they're interested in. If you're between the ages of 14 to 120 and beyond, I have the same adventure as a one-shot on Start Play. All details are in the links below. If you have at least 6 players, I can do private game sessions for your group on any topic you'd like to play through. D&D Christmas, come save Santa from a group of evil elves who have kidnapped him and stolen the sleigh. Fight through fun holiday-themed monsters and get cool holiday swag. Mention this podcast to get $5 off your adventure when you sign up for either session.
So, for this movie review, if you haven't guessed, we are reviewing Monty Python and the Holy Grail and talking mostly about the D&D aspects as well as the quality of the jokes. Massive spoilers for anyone who has not seen this film. Let's be honest, it came out in the 70s. If you have not seen this film, you've probably been living under a rock, but that aside. To start off, we should clarify that Monty Python as a whole is basically a comedic group, a British comedic group, most well known for the Flying Circus TV show, and a lot of gags that you might see around the internet, like self-defense against fresh fruit, or and now for something completely different, followed by the explosion, actually came from Monty Python. And they produced 3 films altogether. The Meaning of Life, The Life of Brian, and The Holy Grail.
Fair warning to all of our viewers, we'll be quoting this film quite a bit, including some of the cursing. Now, of course, some of it's in British, so American audiences might not see it as cursing, but the British fans across the sea will. Some jokes might go over your head, or you might not understand them due to the British humor style. We do recommend that this movie is for ages 16 and up due to some adult situations in the film. You know, nothing horribly, horribly bad. Maybe just like a PG-16 and up rating. Let's get the big questions out of the way. What kind of scenario would the Holy Grail entail? Well, it's effectively a campaign with lots of shenanigans, trash talking, outdated references, running jokes, and by the end of it all, the DM gets fed up with all of the players' shenanigans and decides to do the classic, I drop rocks, everyone dies, and game over. But in this case, the police show up and arrest all of the characters. If you're looking for a serious campaign, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is not it, and truthfully, a lot of D&D games follow this same format of wacky shenanigans and crazy jokes.
And right away, the movie tells you what kind of film it is from the opening credits because everybody got sacked, and basically they did the credits at the very last minute and at great expense, as the movie entails. This is an inside joke. This was actually one of the first times they actually did meta humor like this, if I'm not mistaken. And the first scene, if there's any joke that is synonymous with this movie, the coconuts acting as the horse hooves is that joke, along with several others, which we will talk about later on. So Arthur and his squire Patsy, they're trotting along and they come across a castle, and basically the guys who live there, they basically ask, "Where'd you get the coconuts?" "What?" "Well, this is a temperate zone." And basically they impart the whole that guy stereotype because of that. And also they, talk about the air velocity of an air-laden swallow, which will be a running gag that will be carried forward.
The joke is constantly running if someone says, what is the air velocity of an air-laden swallow? They say, African or European? I don't know that. Ah!
We will.
And then
we
they
will,
go into
yeah.
debate. They go into debate on how the two birds could have carried it on a line to get it to Britain, or, do coconuts migrate? The movie is very much a commentary on our interpretation of medieval times, particularly with a bring out your dead bit that's focusing on the plague of Europe. This is clearly an all-paladin party moving through this adventure. I'm not dead yet.
Yes,
Yes,
he
he
is.
is. He says he isn't. And it's basically a guy trying to get rid of his father-in-law that he doesn't like, and he basically bribes the dead cart guy to cart the man off after bonking him on the head with a stick.
Right, see you next Tuesday. Alright, so let's get this bit out of the way because we come across the Black Knight. The Black Knight fight is probably one of the silliest moments in the film, but as a campaign encounter, it's brilliant. 'Tis but a scratch.
Scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
What's that there, then?
I've had worse. It's just a flesh wound. Fun fact about
Look at your leg.
Ah! Anyway, right, I'll do you for that.
You what?
Come here.
Look, you stupid git, you got no arms left.
How about Joe?
All right, we'll call it a draw.
So, believe it or not, this was actually referenced in a Bond movie. John Cleese played Q after Desmond Llewellyn passed away in the movie, and he basically took over the role in Die Another Day. And Bond says when he's going after the virtual simulation, he says, check the replay, you'll find he's dead and she's only got a flesh wound. And John Cleese, basically his expression is like, I see what you did there.
That's pretty much the tone of the movie. The characters are very serious in their roles, but the audience does not take this seriously whatsoever. Another thing the movie does set up is one joke, and they pay it off multiple times. The coconuts, there's the horses being coconuts. The French people keep showing up.
Oh, God.
And the reoccurring characters that will show up, they just keep playing the same jokes over and over again. There's also the witch scene. They're trying to do a witch hunt.
And this is where we meet Sir Bedivere, and he's actually like, he's a knight of logic, so he basically is trying to determine if two swallows could carry a coconut. And then they bring up the supposed witch, and they clearly put this thing on her, and it's actually John Cleese because he plays multiple roles in the movie, and he goes, she turned me into a newt.
Newt?
I got better. And then, well, King Arthur basically comes along and, says, well, if she's equal in weight to a duck, then she's a witch. And actually, they basically he recruits a bunch of knights, and then the movie basically kind of plays into the idea of the Bastion, as we talked about in our DM guide review. And you could say that this movie actually, that the new DM guide got the idea of the Bastion as a whole from this movie, though it could be longer. And then it transitions into a musical, which, if I'm not mistaken, there's something about the actual musical Spamalot actually kind of makes reference to this scene too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So back in the 70s, there was a musical called Camelot, which was about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Probably where they got the idea for this movie from, honestly. And when they get to Camelot, you just see this castle up on this hillside. And King Arthur just turns around and goes, on second thought, let's not go to Camelot. 'Tis a silly place. And the squire just mumbles, it's only a model. When you play the video game for this, and unless you have a CD drive on a computer, you're not going to be able to play this video game anymore. When you click on the castle, it actually falls over as a cardboard cutout. But when they say it's only a model, they go into the musical number where the knights are dancing on tables and singing about how they dance and sing and eat Spamalot. And in the movies, or sorry, not the movie, the play Spamalot, they actually act out this whole scene in the play. Spamalot is the Broadway version of King Arthur and the Holy Grail, or Monty Python's King Arthur and the Holy Grail.
And then, well, they come across God himself, Arthur, King of the Britons. Oh, don't grovel. One thing I can't stand is people groveling.
I'm averting my eyes, oh Lord.
Well, don't. It's like those miserable psalms. They're so depressing. So, would you say that the quest that God being a divine entity setting the knights on their way, would that count as a adventure hook possibly as we talked about in our DM guide?
Absolutely. And I love the fact that they just accept this quest and go with it. They ask no questions. They just do the thing. They have no idea why God wants this object. They have no idea how to get it or where it is, um, or even how to get it back to God because he's just this animated face in the clouds. They end up going along the way and talking to some peasants who are gathering up mud mixed with dirt and piling it onto trays. And basically, King Arthur asks them questions, and they're like, well, I didn't vote for you. The one's like, you don't vote for kings. And the guy's like, well, how'd you become king? So King Arthur goes into the whole Lady of the Lake held aloft Excalibur, making him king of the Britons. And the guy's like, well, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no system of government. And then I'll have Deadponic go into the next scene where he grabs the peasants by the lapels.
Ah, yeah. See, why it's inherent in the system. And then they move on, and then they come to probably the most famous part of this movie that anybody could pretty much quote is the French knight taunting the party. Now, question. Does this scene hold up, or is it being very stereotypical of both the French and of the times because of this movie taking roughly around 932 AD?
This was classic for the time period. The French and Anglo-Saxons were always fighting back and forth for land in England and France. That went on for centuries, just fighting back and forth. Who owns which part of France? Who owns which part of Britain? And there's just culturally, medievally in Britain, it is known that the French are going to be against the Anglo-Saxons at all times and try to push them out. Now, this is one of the most quoted parts of the movie, where the French basically tell them to go away. They've already got a grail. They're not sharing it with King Arthur. And, just go find your own.
Why do you think I have this outrageous French accent? You don't frighten us, you English pig dog. I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
And then the French chuck a cow at them. I can't make this up if I tried. Hurling animal carcasses and other dead bodies was a standard means of conducting siege warfare. You were trying to get the enemies to get very violently ill so that they died off by sickness, and then you could take the castle. The defenders didn't like it so much. You don't want dead bodies crashing down in your house. After the cow incident, King Arthur and his knights build a Trojan wooden bunny and wheel it up to the front gate, knock and run away. Unfortunately, they forgot the important step of being inside the Trojan bunny. And it doesn't matter anyways, because the French also fling that over the walls of the catapult, and it squishes the same poor squire that got hit by the cow. Now, time for something completely different. The movie completely changes strategies and switches over to your classic British historian TV narrator who's talking about medieval times in Europe. And as he's doing his monologue, a knight on the only horse in the movie rides up, slits his throat, and rides away. And his wife runs up and screams at the dead body.
Aha! Alright, so the knights split up. We do not recommend this for actual campaigns unless your DM just happens to be sadistic and convinces you otherwise. But first up is Sir Robin, who's minstrel, which is the guy who sings and he taps on the tambourine. He sings a song about horrible ways to die until they come across the three-headed knight. Now, how would one use the three-headed knight as an actual monster encounter?
I love the three-headed knight. And commentary on Sir Robin, he has a chicken for his symbol on his surcoat. So he is already set out to be the coward of the team. He has his minstrels following along. They're like a theme band. They play his theme song every time he goes places. The three-headed knight is arguing over how they're going to kill Sir Robin. During this time, Sir Robin and his group of minstrels just kind of sneak away. But I would use a three-headed creature in the whole, there's that classic trope. this guard tells the truth, this guard tells a lie, figure out who is who, and then enter through the correct door. Well, now you have a third member of the group, and one of us tells the truth, one of us lies, and you don't mention anything about the third head, and you don't know who's who. So it makes the puzzle a little bit more difficult. And, it could be fun to confuse your players that way. So
So,
Robin leaves scene, sneaking away.
and, well, the minstrel sings about it. Brave Sir Robin ran away.
No,
Bravely ran away, away.
I didn't.
When danger reared its ugly head, he bravely turned his tail and fled. Yes, brave Sir Robin turned about the Galilee he checkened out. Bravest of the brave Sir Robin.
So next up is the Sir Galahad scene, and don't worry about those minstrels. Eventually, they die and get eaten in the wintertime by the knights because they're out of food. So yeah, that's the last we see of the singing. Sir Galahad, this is the one where we put in the PG-16 rating and above. This scene doesn't age very well. He ends up in a castle that has the Grail glowing above it. And it turns out that it is full of virgins that are dressed as nuns. There's very much adult humor in this line.
It turns out that this castle's name, as I found out, is called Castle Anthrax. Take that how you will. And one of the, we'll say, young women, she has probably my favorite line, and it's just the randomness of the names. Midget, Crapper.
Yes, oh Zoot.
I am Zoot's identical twin sister, Dingo. And then, well,
Get
basically,
on with it.
yes, get on with it. Yes, get on with it. They're literally just saying, oh, this scene is basically dragging too long. And then, well, basically everybody says, get on with it. Get on with the scene.
And the get on with it is a classic reoccurring joke in these that, we forgot how to end this properly, so we're just going to cut it off here with the get on with it.
Pretty much. And so, well, Sir Galahad, it turns out, well, he's wounded, and also he comes across a bunch of the other maidens. And it turns out that Zoot is the one who lit the beacon, and they have a very specific punishment for doing that.
We have but one punishment for lighting the grail-shaped beacon. You must tie her to a bed and spank her.
Spank me!
And me!
And me!
And me! And it just becomes a riot of girls yelling about getting spanking. At this point, it becomes super adult. We're going to cut it off here and not quote the rest of it because it does get into some, spicy territory. And then we move on to scene 24, and they actually have a card that pops up that says scene 24.
Yes, and now we cut to, well, the old man. He's Sir Bedivere and Arthur are talking to the old man, and then he laughs maniacally, and then, well, they're teleported into a forest, and they come across the knights who say "Nee," and, well, the knights who say "Nee," they demand something of Arthur and Bedivere.
So Bedivere and King Arthur are sent out to find a shrubbery. Now, in American, that just means pretty landscaping. It is British slang for something else, which we are not going to get into right now, but feel free, if you're above the age of 18, to do your own research. So they're sent out to get some nice, holly and laurel bushes and set them up in the forest. There is a cut scene where it was edited out of the movie originally, where they actually go and try to buy the shrubbery. They end up harassing an old lady for it.
Oh my god.
And someone comes along and says, oh, it is dark times when ruffians are beating up an old woman over a shrubbery. So they get the shrubbery, they bring it back, they set it up with a nice little fence around it. And the knights who say "Nee" are satisfied, but they give them another impossible quest of go cut down the tallest tree in the forest with a fish, a herring. At this point, some other knights show up and King Arthur begins talking to them. And we find out that the knights who say "Nee" don't like the word "it." If you say "it," they cover their ears and start screaming.
Yes. Now, what are your thoughts on the Knights of Nee as an encounter overall?
It is that it is that classic fetch quest. Hey, there's a roadblock. You can't get past unless you pay the toll, get the item. Um, but yeah, it's your classic fetch quest that they're giving them to do. And then it's like they fulfill it and like, oh, wait, we can't let you do the thing yet. Here's another fetch quest. And at that point, the players are like, no, we don't want to do another fetch quest. Let's walk away while they're screaming and holding their ears.
So yeah, and then so the next scene is Sir Lancelot's scene.
I love Swamp Castle. So we start in Swamp Castle with this young man on a windowsill about to burst in the song, a nice allude to the Camelot musical. And his dad bursts in and stops the music, like there's orchestral music playing. He's like, stop that, stop the music. And we find out that this young lad is going to get married. And the dad's like, one day, lad, all this will be yours. And he's like, what, the curtains? He's like, no, not the curtains, all that you can see. I built this castle. And apparently the castle fell down, burned over, sank in the swamp, got rebuilt, burned down, sank in the swamp, got rebuilt. It's got rebuilt like 5 times. And now it's the strongest castle because the last one stayed up. But this young man doesn't want to get married. So he's praying for rescue and escape. And here's where Sir Lancelot comes in.
Now, honestly, well, the one joke that pretty much everybody's kind of mimicked at this point is, well, Sir Lancelot is basically, it looks like he's running closer to the castle, but he's actually just running in place, and they basically play that over and over again until he finally gets to the gate. This is the one scene of the movie that kind of is, in my opinion, boring, but the Lancelot running in place and then going into the castle and slaughtering a bunch of innocents is pretty hilarious. And then, well, basically he finds the knight. How he actually gets there is that an arrow is shot out and it hits his squire and he's like, message for you, sir. And then he falls over and dies. It's pretty funny. Isn't there something about a wedding?
Yes, the young boy in the tower who shoots the message has to marry a very wealthy young lady who has large tracts of land. And unite the 2 kingdoms together. Apparently her lands have like good pork and pigs and things like that. And the dad's like, we need this alliance. We live in a bloody swamp. We got to have this wealth. And Lancelot goes through and basically slaughters half the castle. He doesn't kill everybody. Runs up to the top of the tower, and the dad bursts in and has a conversation with Lancelot. Meanwhile, the kid is trying to climb out the window with the sheets he's tied together. Dad cuts the sheets so the kid falls to his death. And then as Lancelot's trying to sneak out, the kid arrives and bursts into song about how he survived the fall and that he's fine. And the dad's like just trying to shut down the musical because he just really doesn't like musicals. And at that, Lancelot is able to escape.
There is one scene I forgot to talk about, is the monks that are chanting and they hit themselves with a board or a book. I have no idea what that's all about, but it's pretty hilarious. But then, while that's going on, Arthur, well, as we explained, Arthur gets the shrubbery, and then, well, the knights, they tell him, we are no longer the knights who say, Nyeh! We are the knights who say, eki, 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 patang, zoing, boing. And, well, basically, they put him on another fetch quest, but then Arthur and his knights just walk away. And then, they actually reunite, and they encounter the Enchanter, again, played by John Cleese. And he shows off his, skill by, blowing himself up, or as we're meant to believe.
And believe it or not, they used most of their budget for the movie on these explosions. The movie is extremely low budget. It looks like they're wearing chainmail. It's knitted. They had some old ladies knit some gray yarn to make it look like chainmail. The Monty Python crew is famous for like playing multiple roles in the movie. So they played multiple characters each. Very low budget movie, but they did a great job with it. And most of the jokes in the movie got cut because they needed some kind of payoff, but they couldn't afford to put that stunt in or that joke in. So all the money went to the explosions. And of course they encounter the enchanter. He's blowing stuff up. And King Arthur is, "What is your name?"
There are some who call me Tim. And,
John
well,
Cleese forgot his line and improvised it. And it's perfect. We have Tim the Enchanter.
and because his name was originally going to be a really long and stupid name, and he just kind of improvised it. So he leads them to, well, he basically explains that the cave that they're going to find the Grail is guarded by a terrifying creature, and he tries to intimidate them, and it's pretty funny. Is it Fluffy Bunny time?
Fluffy Bunny time.
Yay! So, they come across the cave, the entrance to the cave, and they see a big giant skull, and they go, dismount, and it's imaginary horses, but they're taking it seriously. And, well, they come across the rabbit, and he's like, you silly sword! You got us all worked up! I soiled my arm, I was so scared! Right, go chop off his head! Right! One rabbit stew coming up, and then, well, the bunny turns out to be super vicious, and, well, bites off the knight's head, and then kills a couple others. And, so, my question is it possible to have a monster like the killer rabbit, or is it too OP for even a high-level party?
So the Vorpal, it's called a Vorpal Bunny in D&D terms. There are stat blocks for it. It is very overpowered. I actually gave one of these to one of my parties. They were playing Curse of Strahd. I felt they were a little underpowered to take on the big bad vampire. So I'm like, here, the barbarian got to have it as a pet. And she always saw it as this cute, fluffy, sweet little bunny that never did anything wrong. The rest of the party over time saw this bunny in combat chopping off people's heads with its sharp teeth, and they were like nervous around the thing, as they should be. And there were situations where the bunny would hop into a building, you would hear screaming and yelling, and the bunny would come out covered in blood, and the barbarian would just go into rage because somebody hurt their precious bunny. And Bunny was in there killing people, and the barbarian would rush in and finish everyone else off. And Bunny was fine. Eventually, they moved on to another dungeon master who continued the adventures beyond, and Bunny ended up being some kind of demon eventually and was able to talk and things. But yeah, Vorpal bunnies are very powerful. Give them out with caution, but it is a fun role-playing thing where they had no idea. They thought it was a sweet little fluffy bunny, and everyone else is like, that thing's a monster.
Yeah.
The only way to stop the Vorpal bunny is the holy hand grenade of Antioch.
Would it help the confusion if we ran away more? Oh, shut up and go change your armor. Well, how are we going to stop it,
Well,
sir?
we have the holy hand grenade.
Yes, of course. The Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch. Brother Maynard, bring up the Holy Hand Grenade. And then it proceeds, basically, one of the priests, Armaments Chapter 2, verses 12 to 19. And then the guy, he has like a really high-pitched voice, and they explain basically how to use the Holy Hand Grenade. And so Arthur, and the grenade itself, the pin is actually just a cross. And so, one thing that I remember vividly was reenacting the scene quite a bit. Right. 1, 2, 5.
Teresa.
3. And then, well, it destroys the bunny. Monty Python, proof that even Bugs Bunny has an evil side. Now, one question is, can you is the Holy Hand Grenade, is it... I heard that there's like, you can actually use it like as an artifact or like an item. I'm pretty sure that's true, correct?
Yes. A lot of things that are in pop culture already have stat blocks made for them, especially ones that came out so long ago. And it is in the SCR, which is free for everyone to use. As an action, you can throw the Holy Hand Grenade up to 60 feet. It makes a 20-foot radius sphere. Each creature must make a 19 dex save or take 12 12-sided dice radiant damage on a failed saving throw half unsuccess. Fiends and undead are vulnerable to this damage. So it's a big kaboom.
Yeah.
Give it out with caution.
So the knights, they get past the bunny, but they also cuts back to the police. They have this running gag where the police are basically catching up with the knights because they think they're the ones who killed the narrator. And then, well...
All right, so the knights go into the cave after blowing up the bunny, and they find the writing on the wall, the clue of where the Grail is. It turns out the Grail is in Castle Ugh.
So the interpretation of this is basically the guy who wrote it on the wall wrote out the death noise he made, or the castle is actually called Ugh. And then, well, what happens next?
The party so it goes into animation time. The party encounters a multi-eyed monster, but halfway through the chase scene, they cut back to the Monty Python, who's famous for animation. They mime him having a fatal heart attack. So he has a fatal heart attack and dies, and then like the monster in the animation just fades away and goes back to real time. As we warned you, this movie is quite strange. Monty Python is famous for putting weird animations into all of their stuff.
So they get out of the cave, and well, it cuts back to the police catching up with them slowly. Then we get to the best part of the movie, and the one that everybody has quoted at some point, the Bridge of Death. Now, this has been, I know at some point somebody has used this in a campaign before. How would you implement this in a fun way without it killing the pacing of the campaign or, killing the party in general?
So, in reality, the Bridge of Death isn't really fatal to the characters. The ones that fall off it, they'll pop up later on in the film. But the ones that make it through, they're like in the last few scenes of the movie. It works like a roadblock. Sometimes DMs don't have everything planned out, especially when the group goes left instead of right. So this could be a time filler for the DM who hasn't quite drawn that part of the map yet, or needs a stalling tactic, or it's just a fun riddle, fun puzzle before they can move on to the next area.
So could you theoretically use the Bridge of Death to punish players who are being bad or, throwing in shenanigans if they answer the questions wrong, or would it just be better to just drop a rock on them?
So, you really shouldn't punish bad behavior in-game with playing tactics, but it could be fun if they answer the questions wrong, to have random silly things happen to them. Maybe they get turned into a giant pink bunny. Maybe they summon an elephant that lands on them. And even though it's called the Bridge of Death, we get these characters back later that answer a question wrong, and it doesn't even have to be a wrong answer. When you change your answer, that's when the bridge triggers.
Yeah, that's true. So Lancelot gets across. Robin, he actually doesn't know the answer to one of the questions, which we'll get to in a minute. And Galahad changes his answer at the last minute. But Arthur figures out a way, which basically ties off a joke at the beginning with the swallows. And basically, well, he outsmarts the bridge keeper, and Bedivere's like, how do you know so much about swallows? Well, you have to know these things when you're a kid. And another joke that running gag that I forgot to mention was that Bedivere actually has like this visor thing that he has to lift up in order to see anything. Now it's time to play our own version of Bridge of Death and see if you guys go the way of Christopher Walken in A View to a Kill or continue to the Castle of Arg. Now, Lady Maeve, Maiden, what is your name?
Lady Maeve.
What is your favorite class?
Ranger.
What is the damage dice for the flurry of blows?
1d4.
Right, off you go. Now...
And I'd be able to cross the bridge.
Yes.
Even if I'm wrong on any of those.
Yes, pretty much. So fun trivia about this scene. When they mention, one of the questions is, what is the capital of Assyria? This is actually a trick question because Assyria would have many capitals. However, because this movie takes place in 932 AD, it would no longer exist as a country, and that area would be under somebody else based around Cairo. So the answer would technically be Cairo. And it's also likely that the bridge keeper was cheating. But we don't know that for sure.
I'm sure he was cheating. So Arthur and Sir Bedivere, Lancelot's around somewhere, but Arthur and Bedivere are the last two knights that make it across the bridge, and they're together for the final scenes. We do see Lancelot later on, but he's not part of this final scene. They get to Castle Arg to find the French taunter and his French friends there. It seems they have outwitted the English.
Hello, stuffy English knights. I unclog my nose in your direction, sons of a window dresser. I wave my private parts at your aunties. And well, they basically they dump a bunch of stuff on them, and then they just like ignore them. We'll just walk away, ignore them. And also, when we're talking about Lancelot actually gets caught by the police, and he actually gets a pat down. Yeah, and then so final scene.
So Arthur and Bedivere have had enough. They go and recruit an army. They don't show that part. They just show up with a bunch of people on the hill. I think they just call them and they show up. Now, because the budget was low, they had like a couple medieval helmets. They had a couple spears. So they have these like close-in shots of various different people with wearing different pieces of kit, but they didn't have enough. So the next scene you see, it's the people from far away, so you can't tell how they're dressed. They rally the army to storm the castle. As they get about 20 feet away from the castle, a load of cop cars show up, blocking them off from the castle, and they start the police start running out, taking away their swords, taking away their spears, throwing them into the paddy wagon, and arresting them all. It is literally a cop-out. In D&D terms, the DM has had enough with the shenanigans and the classic, I drop rocks and everybody dies. But in this case, everyone gets arrested and goes to jail. And then the end credit, card rolls. They did the credits at the beginning through 5 different formats because they kept firing people so that there's no credits at the end of the movie.
Pretty much. And basically
so final thoughts.
So the cop basically goes up to the camera and he's like, right, shut that off. And then, well, we were left to mistaken. Well, actually, most theaters at the time when they showed this, they thought it was just extra film, so they didn't realize it. But that's basically the end of the movie. We don't know what happens. And one little plot hole about this is that the police actually have the wrong people because the person that killed the narrator was on a horse, and all the knights are on pretend horses. So there's that. So final thoughts. I highly recommend this movie if you have not seen it and someone says, oh, have you seen Monty Python? And you say no, then you're like, all right, sit down. We're going to watch this movie, basically. I definitely would say this is a very shenanigan-filled, very railroady type campaign in terms of D&D terms. But it is a very entertaining movie. You do have to know your British slang a little bit and a little bit of a couple references here and there. But it is a very fun and entertaining movie. I did not know that there was actually a video game based off this movie, which is just like insane to think about. Lady Maeve, your thoughts?
Definitely a must-see if you're over the age of 16 and you're playing D&D. This is mandatory viewing almost because your group is going to quote this, especially if they're over the age of 30. Even if they're below the age of 30, this is in pop culture now. The swallows, the coconuts, the knights who say knee, and it's going to come up in your game. So as a cultural standpoint, if you're playing D&D, you're playing Pathfinder, then yes, this is a must view. Now there are 2 versions of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. There is the the one that came out on DVD originally, and then later on they released an extended almost version, which has the cut scene about them harassing the old lady about the shrubbery. It starts with a video in black and white about a toothpaste company. And then it goes into the Holy Grail Monty Python scene. There's also an intermission in the middle. Or just there's a thing that says intermission and it's a so yeah, there's extended version. Definitely see that if you can. Word of caution, Monty Python the Holy Grail, Monty Python Flying Circus was in the 70s. It was a different time. There are episodes that have racism in them. from the Holy Grail, not the Holy Grail, but the Flying Circus. So just watch it with a grain of salt. Some of the episodes weren't that great. I mean, honestly, not every joke lands good, but there's a lot of classic Monty Python out there that is worth watching. You have the dead parrot sketch. You have the cheese shop where the poor guy's trying to buy cheese. Every cheese he asks for is not in the shop because the guy has no cheese in the cheese shop. There's the lumberjack song. There's so much classic Monty Python that is good and funny, and there's a bunch of stuff that isn't. So I highly recommend Holy Grail. If you're going to watch Life of Brian, I would say that one's 18 and up. There is nudity in that
100%,
one.
100%.
Yeah, 100% full frontal nudity. That is, you got to be older. There's a lot of spicy jokes in that one. So that one I'd definitely say 18 and up. Meaning of Life, probably also 18 and up. They get into some topics that some people might consider a little too spicy because it is from birth to death and people's experience thereof. So they do get into some things that, you may not want a kid watching.
So,
but yes, definitely watch it.
So when I was looking up trivia for this movie, believe it or not, there's this old computer game called Heroes of Might and Magic. It's actually the third game. The cheats that you can use are actually based off of Monty Python quotes. Like, for example, Shrubbery gives you a bunch of resources. Trojan Rabbit wins you the scenario. I'm Not Dead makes a couple of your characters and your monsters invincible. Coconuts actually gives you unlimited movement. So there is a lot of pop culture related to this film specifically. And there are actually stat blocks for some of the monsters, which I found out, which is interesting. But stay tuned for next week because we're going to be talking about lightning, thunder, and all kinds of weird shenanigans. If for the 40K fans, you might this might be familiar for you because we're talking about another Sisters episode, but it's not the Sisters episode you're thinking of. Anyway, we'll see you guys next time.
Everyone be safe, be well, and we'll see you on the flip side.